You're listening to the Free to Be Mindful podcast, which invites you along on a journey to learn of mindful living, grow in mental health, and inspire through personal growth. In a world where we can often feel much stress and overwhelm, this podcast provides bite-sized tips and real talk conversations, empowering you to embrace mindfulness and nurture your full potential. I'm your host, Vanessa de Jesus Guzman, educator, licensed professional counselor, entrepreneur, and mom. I'm passionate about helping others live life with peace of mind and ease of heart without losing their, here we go. Hello and welcome to episode 166 of the Free to Be Mindful podcast. I hope that you're feeling good, looking good, and doing better in this world than you were yesterday. So we are full on into the school year. And even if you are not an educator, it always seems that in the fall, life just gets a little bit more of an upswing. We have more places to go to, perhaps more things to do, everything that comes along with fall. And we know that when life gets busy, sometimes not only do you have to deal with the event or the things or all of the things that are happening, but also sometimes there comes a lot to deal with when it comes to the emotional and the mental and the physical. And for some, the simple solution to dealing with stress and overwhelm and all of the things can be to disconnect, to turn off emotions, to turn to apathy as a solution instead, so that we don't have to carry the weight of that emotional distress or think about certain solutions or experiences. I know for myself, when I have so many things on my plate and a long list of things to do, I tend to turn inward, which means I get off social media. I don't really like to get back to texts and emails, even to friends and family members, because it seems that I have so much to handle and so much to do that adding that one more thing can be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak. And one may think that turning inward or turning off when it comes to our emotional selves to not have to deal with those extra things, it seems that maybe this can save us a lot of time and energy, right? Well, we have to think about, is apathy really a good thing? When we consider why we use apathy as a coping mechanism and how it can get in the way of our journey of self growth, we see that caring isn't a weakness. In fact, it's really what builds some of our greatest strengths, relationships, and even our worldly views. Without the ability to feel, we really remove our possibility to grow. And that can be known as the IDC effect. And it's just an acronym that quite simply emphasizes the mindset of, have you caught on to what it is yet? Maybe when kids just text IDC, it stands for, I don't care. Whether this roots from the idea that we truly don't care because we think it's easier not to care, this effect can be an angle that hurts us instead of actually healing us. So, what's the psychology or what's the thought process behind apathy, and what does it really mean? Apathy can be defined as a lack of feeling, a lack of emotion, interest, or concerns. There was an article done by the Cleveland Clinic which stated in the fields of psychiatry and psychology, apathy usually describes emotional detachment and a reduced ability to experience pleasure. And in addition, people who experience traumatic events may develop apathy syndrome, which is really indifference and emotional detachment, as a way to protect themselves mentally and prevent further distress. And this is really common when it comes to survivors of catastrophes or prisoners of war because it's just really traumatic. And this can be a part of post traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. And apathy can be used when we have dealt with a tough experience in our past, or when we are handling suppressed emotions, or even when we're experiencing fear attached to what may happen if we do allow ourselves to feel. And this apathy can actually cause an absence that impacts mental health, that makes you feel really sad and perhaps can lead into depression. Detaching oneself from the world or people around you, becoming disinterested, lacking enthusiasm in what once brought you joy, and shutting down or becoming shut off from the world can become a reality. Now, we want to make sure that we aren't quick to diagnose ourselves, and this doesn't happen overnight, but throughout the course of time, if you feel as though you are experiencing this, or if you are a friend or family member of someone who is slowly shutting down over the course of time and has a hard time, let's say, getting out of bed and doing the things that once brought them joy, that's when we really want to make sure that we seek out professional help. So we're talking about apathy with an A, but then there's a word that sounds really similar to it, but isn't quite the same, and that word is empathy. To understand apathy and its impacts, we also need to understand empathy and its impacts. So, empathy is the ability to understand the feelings of another. So, think about a time when someone you cared about was hurting. Did you feel sad or like you were sharing in some of their heartbreak? That's empathy, and it can be an emotional connection, and sometimes it can even feel physical as if you're actually feeling yourself hurting. Empathy can be a powerful thing. I feel empathy, I mean, even in Disney movies or even in these Pixar shorts that are quite short in length, but they really know how to pull at your heartstrings sometimes. And yes, I am one to cry at the drop of a dime. So empathy is really different from apathy, which can affect personal situations such as a relationship or a friendship when you became more detached and you weren't communicating your feelings. It can impact our goals and dreams if they no longer interest us. It can even impact the vulnerability that you have with yourself and your own surroundings, because being apathetic can hold you back from having that open, honest conversation with yourself and truly feeling your feels. Apathy can also impact external situations like seeing something in the news but not allowing yourself to feel for them, or seeing a situation that doesn't involve you or relate to your situation, so you choose to stay passive about it. For example, if a friend is going through an issue but you aren't, so you're just not as present as you can be when they may need a shoulder to lean on. And it can even impact us in societal issues because when we become really apathetic to this type of progress, we run the risk of falling back when it comes to social justice, progress, environmental problems, and so much more. It's like a domino effect. A small change that might not influence us 100% directly may impact us in some way when it comes to future generations. So our voice really does matter. And while I'm giving you these types of examples, I don't want you to think that if one day you're just having, let's say, a mental health care day, that you are detaching yourself from everyone so that you can take care of you. That's not quite the same. This is to a bigger extreme when you really become detached from the world. Sometimes, in order to protect our peace, I hear very often that people choose to not watch the news because they don't want to become inundated with all of, unfortunately, the negativity that sometimes the news brings. Is that quite being apathetic? Perhaps, but I do understand that concept of protecting your inner peace, especially if you feel that that's going to bring you down to a level that's not going to be of any benefit from you. So there is a fine line there. But I do want you to know that choosing empathy instead of apathy can lead to understanding wider perspective of others, opening yourself up to new opportunities, being honest with yourself and how you're really feeling about things, learning from our experiences, and even building close relationships, especially with those we love. So the question is then, how can we embrace empathy and move away from that learned apathy that, yes, can sometimes be of benefit to us when we want our inner peace still protected, but sometimes it's really not of benefit? Many times we have experiences that lead us toward apathy, whether it is growing up in a certain culture or society that doesn't really talk about emotions, or showing that crying makes us weak. We hear that very often. And sometimes we may not embrace empathy because it's simply unfamiliar, or it takes us away from being comfortable if we're typically not empathetic. So, to cultivate empathy, we can start with just the little things, like being mindful of the time that we spend with those we love, being kind to a stranger or a friend in need, because after all, kindness is free. We can also have a more positive attitude toward ourselves or other people we meet. I know sometimes when people are in a rush and they cut you off when you're driving instead of using colorful words or gestures, let's say, I always think, well, maybe if they're late one more time for work, they might be fired. Or maybe they're picking up somebody in labor, so they've got to get there quickly. Or maybe a loved one is dying and they're trying to get to the last breath. That is always a much more empathetic point of view. And I really try to give the benefit of the doubt instead of saying, well, that person's a jerk and they shouldn't have cut me off. So that's just one example. And know that empathy isn't really necessarily about relating to how the other person is feeling or to what is happening, but it's just allowing someone the space to feel the way that they're feeling. So, listening with intention, listening from the heart, and just to give them and provide that other person space instead of listening to respond. Letting others share their story as they need to and play a part in it by simply existing alongside them. Empathy can also be about allowing ourselves to learn and grow. If there's a situation we weren't as empathetic as we could have been, it's okay to forgive ourselves because we're only human. We're always working on ways to become the person that we want to be. And each day allows us to work through the different situations that we face. Remember, it's important to create a balance because you can't stay informed and engaged without leading yourself to burnout and excessive stress. If there's ever a time that you feel yourself getting stressed or overinvolved or overstimulated or overwhelmed, take a step and remove yourself in order again to protect your inner peace. Whether that may be taking a pause from social media or telling someone you love or that you care for that you need some time for yourself. Don't be afraid to take a breather as you need to value your time, your energy, and your inner peace. Because empathy isn't at the expense of yourself. It simply encourages you to spread some love and joy while investing those positive emotions for yourself too. So, my friends, as you hopefully reflect on the message that you heard today, I hope that you can see how learning about apathy and empathy and seeing and really making small changes within yourself and how you respond to others or to situations that you may come across. Doing small things can really lead to more compassion. It can lead to stronger connections so that we can be a better global society as a whole and make a positive impact on those we meet and on situations that need our positive impact. Coincidentally, today, if you are watching this on YouTube, I am wearing a shirt that says, Be kind. And it's those small steps, kindness in very small ways that truly can make a really big impact. And speaking of YouTube, this podcast is actually first created as a video. Then I take the audio and upload it onto all podcast platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts the most, you'll find the Free to Be Mindful podcast on there. And if you'd like to check us out on YouTube, you can see the visual. So if you see things referenced like my yellow Be Kind shirt today, that's exactly what we're talking about. And regardless of what platform you listen or view this podcast on, a review is always so greatly, greatly appreciated. That lets me know what you like and even what you don't like, and it helps others find the podcast, whether it be visual version or the audio version, it helps them find it too, because then it's pushed out to more people. So if you just had a moment and can go onto your favorite podcast platform to leave a rate or review, that would be greatly appreciated. So right now, regardless of where you are or what you're doing, take a moment right now to think of small ways that you can bring kindness to others. That perhaps can be in complimenting someone else, even a stranger, in helping someone out with a task like a parent, a partner, your child, a friend, or even a stranger, to get involved with something that makes a difference, like a community service, donations, spreading the word, in telling someone that they are important to you. Sometimes we overlook these small acts because we think, well, they know that they're important to me. But it's always great to let them know, because it's always great to hear it. And you just never know what tomorrow brings. Have compassion with others and listen when needed. Listening can be as great as a gift as speaking is. And just as importantly, my friends, take the time to think about how you can be kinder to yourself. Think about how you can be kinder through your words, through your thoughts, and through your actions. It is always my pleasure. And remember, in a world where you are free to be anything that you want to be, you are always free to be mindful. Catch you next week.